my name is Priya Shah, and this is my family tree story. My great family members in my lineage is originally from India. On my mother's side, my grandfather moved from India to Uganda during British rule. At that time, a lot of Indians were brought to East Africa to help build the railway system in East Africa, as British was ruling both India and East Africa. And my mom's family ended up growing up in Uganda. My grandfather married my grandmother, and my grandmother was 16 when she came to Uganda to marry my grandmother, so very young age. And they started a family and settled in Uganda, and had 10 children. At that time, Indians had lived there for a century because of after the British were done building the railroad, the Indians were done building the railroad. Indians ended up just settling there. And so it was a huge population that ended up being in East Africa, and still today, Southeast Asian culture very much influences East African culture, which has been really cool to see and understand growing up. So my mom grew up speaking both Gujarati, English, and Swahili because she grew up in that region. She lived there till she was 21, until the 1970s Southeast Asian exodus happened, which is when a dictator named Idi Amin came in and suddenly had a dream that all the Southeast Asians in Uganda needed to leave. And so he ordered them to leave within 90 days or threatened them to be put in concentration camps. So kind of similar to what we hear from things that Trump says now. Initially you'll hear an outrageous thing and you can't believe it. And that was kind of the sentiment initially until it started getting really bad. At that time, the exodus led to a lot of, political unrest, and he ended up killing about 500,000 people across the country, mostly people that were opposed to his party, and ended up taking all the property that the Indians used to own. So my mom's family ended up splitting up. Different brothers and sisters went different places, but her and a few sisters and her mother ended up getting a ticket out to Mombasa, and from there they took a boat to India. And they basically came back to India as refugees. And that was a little hard to settle there because they've never grown up there or lived there before. And so they only ended up living there for a few years until they came to the States. And my mom was one of the first people to come to the States from her family, and she helped bring the rest of the family to Chicago. So that's where she ended up settling. She ended up actually meeting my father in the US as well. So my father's history is all in India. He was born right after Indian independence. So India had been ruled by the British for 200 years. And in 1947 was when they declared independence, which is when my father was born. He was born in 48. And so he was born at a really critical time where this nation was trying to build itself on its own, as well as deal with a really tragic, terrible partition between India and Pakistan. So a time of forming a lot of understanding of Indian identity, as well as how to rebuild the country. And he ended up staying in India much longer than my mother. He grew up there, stayed there, took college, worked there, and then ended up coming to the States as an adult. And so for both of them coming to the U.S. At a age where they had never been to an English-speaking country, never lived in like kind of the Western world. They faced a lot of um, oppression and outcasting, right? Because they didn't necessarily speak the language right when they came to the States, and they, were brown in this country. And so getting a job, getting education was really hard, but it was almost like a tax that they felt like they paid in order to come here. So they dealt with a lot of discrimination of not getting jobs, being rejected all the time, hearing different things that I even remember hearing growing up, like go back to where you come from, speak English, you know, um, different comments that are trying to get people to be one identity. And they went through that just to kind of survive here. They would do a lot of like odd end jobs and ended up studying here as well so that they could get a better job and support the family. So that we can live a healthier, more safe, educated lifestyle. And I think the beautiful part of both of their stories is that they saw a lot of tragedy between each other and and as a result of colonization. Um, and despite seeing all of that in the back of their heads, it was about growing a family and ensuring the future kids will have a safe lifestyle that provides the education and prosperity that they wanted for them, even before they were born, which I think is really fascinating and beautiful because a lot of us don't even think that far ahead anymore, right? Especially if we're going through trauma and struggle and oppression. So our family, my parents actually ended up meeting in the States. My dad moved to Chicago to be married with my mother, and they settled here. And that was when I was born in Chicago. So I am the result of both of their lineages and both of their histories and carry that everywhere I go. I am very much connected to the history of what has happened in India and impacted our identities and our associations with each other as an Indian culture. And I'm also very impacted by the history of East Africa and what has happened with identities there. So much so that it's led me back to go to both countries. And also with the Simple Good, we now do work in East Africa. I actually was able to go back to my mom's hometown, do a program in Uganda, and just really reconnect to all these stories that I grew up with, understanding, the things that she had gone through in growing up in East Africa, and it really reconnected me to understand that, a lot of our struggles are really built and created by us, right? And therefore, it can be broken down and mended by us as well. And so going back to East Africa was really meaningful for me because through storytelling and through sharing each other's identity, we can create familiarity. And when I went back, it felt like I already knew the place. And I had never been there before. So I think that's the power of ancestry, of storytelling, of us understanding our history, is that once we know that, we feel connected to everything. So I feel very grateful to be able to manifest that within my life and be able to continue the legacy of both my parents. So that's my family tree story, and I'm really grateful that all of you guys are now a part of it.